All right. Welcome back to the Ex-Homeschoolers Club. I am your host, Jacob Gooden, and today I'm here with one of my really good friends, Nick Burgess. We have known each other for a very long time. Yes, we've known each other for a very, very long time. We've been buddies for, oh my God, how long has it been?
We met during the production and play the Mitchells did of the Beauty and the Beast.
That's right.
Because
Oh
you
my
were
God,
initially
that
friends
was,
with Carly first, and so she's like, "Oh, I got to introduce you to my friend Jacob." And I was like, "Oh, cool!" And I remember you were playing one of the wolves, and I remember like meeting you, and I was like, "Oh, this guy's cool." So however long
yeah.
it's been since then,
Oh
but
my gosh. So it's just so people know, so our friends the Mitchells, they would host every summer. They had these backyard plays, and it was like theater in the round style. Their driveway was like a circle driveway and with a grass spot in the middle, and they would build these sets, and we would do these theater productions every summer. But yeah, I knew your sister because we took a writing class together,
mhm.
and then yeah, I do remember that. I remember during that show, yeah, after she introduced us, and then what's so funny is like we became really good friends, and then our dads became really good friends, and yeah, it's just so funny. And our dads are still like best friends to this day, which is hilarious. I feel like I hear more about your dad than than
You hear
about
about
you.
me? Yeah,
Yeah, I hear about your dad, and then through that I hear about you, just in talking to my dad. But dude, that's crazy. That has been a long time that we've known each other. But yeah, we grew up pretty much in the same homeschool group. I mean, you like, I guess tell me like your homeschool journey. Like, have you always been a homeschool kid? Did you go to public school or private school or anything?
yeah. So growing up, my parents opted to homeschool us, like from preschool all the way through high school. So yeah, I was one of those kids that was homeschooled my entire life. Um, I have a couple older siblings that were able to go to uh, high school for a couple years. So like my older brother Justin, he really wanted to do sports, and so since we were homeschooled and in a homeschool group, there wasn't really much for him to do sports, and so they opted to let him join a local high school so that he could play sports. And then my oldest sister, she did, I think, the last 2 years of high school at an actual public school. But then like me, my sister, who's just, Carly, just older than I am, and then
Yeah.
my younger brother, Ben, we were all homeschooled through high school all the way.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, no, cuz yeah, there wasn't any sports. I mean, there was a couple community leagues for soccer and stuff like that, but there wasn't like a whole lot of, I mean, there is no sports. I mean,
Yeah.
I convinced my parents that airsoft became our sport.
Hmm.
And so they funded my my airsoft stuff, and then we would
Yes.
play frequently, both at Derry's house, and then also I know your grandpa had his ranch in Ojai, that we would go play. And gosh, we had so many airsoft guns; it was insane.
It was gnarly. I think at one time I had like seven, but like the
Yeah,
majority, they were all like spring. So it's like, you're having to pull the slide back every time you needed to fire. But
I was gonna ask you, do you remember? So we have this photo. I'm gonna have to see if I can find it. But I know we did like a photo shoot at one point. We laid out everybody's guns, and we just had like a ton of them. And then you guys like made bags of flour to look like cocaine, and we like and taped it up, and we had like these bricks of cocaine. It was totally not like okay, but we play like games like protect the president. We would,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
we would do like recreate all kinds of stuff, right?
I can remember because yeah, we did that picture. I think that was on my grandparents' driveway. I think I remember we did that picture in the driveway. But yeah, I remember like
Yeah,
playing protect the president. Like, you'd have the Americans, the CIA groups, and then you'd have like the terrorists. And
yeah.
I can remember like our dads would basically be the terrorists, and you'd hear them over on the other side of the field just like screaming. And we're just
Yep.
like, oh, we gotta go. Oh.
You know what was great about your grandpa's playing at your grandpa's house too was like he also had all of like the gators and the quads and all that stuff too. So like not only were we running around, but some of the times we were driving those things around,
Yep,
shooting each other off of like
shooting
dirt
each
bikes
other.
and stuff.
Yeah, yes.
Which
The
is crazy.
go-karts, the gator.
Yeah, exactly. So, oh my gosh, I can't. Yeah, it's so funny. But yeah, I always just tell people, I'm like, that was my sport in high school. Like, I had my league, and we were the
Hmm.
airsoft league, and we would go play, every it felt like every weekend, but it was definitely a lot. It was at least once, twice a month.
Yeah, I would say that much. Yeah. Do you remember that
Yeah.
time you walked right by a rattlesnake? Do you remember that?
Oh, dude, that was terrifying. Yeah, I walked right past it, and I was wearing shorts. I mean, I had sneakers on, but it still could have got me. But yeah, that thing was long too. It was a massive
Yeah, that was a
rattlesnake.
good like 3.5 foot snake. He was just like stretched out and
Yeah.
you just walked right past him. I was like, Jacob, watch out.
Yeah, I think I'm thankful that yeah, he was stretched out. He wasn't coiled up, so I think that also played in my favor because he was just kind of chilling and he wasn't really in attack.
Yeah, he wasn't
Yeah.
in like defense mode. He was just kind of like, what the heck's going on? There's like people walking next to me.
Oh my gosh, that was so good. I mean, I recently had Derry on, and we were talking about playing in his backyard, and his dad was part of the police department, and so they would, every now and then police officers would show up, and they were always surprised by, because our airsoft guns looked like real guns, aside
Hmm.
from the orange tips. But like, I mean, we had AK-47s and G36s and M4s, and we had all kinds of like 911s, and like we we had so much stuff, and some of it was like metal and like felt
Hmm.
real. I mean, you would never know that it was not a real gun.
If you had just taken the orange tip off, like there's unless you're like really holding it and like looking at it. If you were just to the untrained eye, you'd be able to be like, oh, that looks like a real gun to me.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of wild to think that our parents like let us play with that kind of stuff. But I mean, we did kind of grow up in the country, so
Yeah, yeah,
there is that. We also played with. Well, I say we played with. We responsibly shot guns regularly
yes,
and owned guns. So we. But I know a lot of us went through gun training and stuff like that. Like we
yeah.
understood that this is not a toy.
The way I was taught is like this is a tool that,
Hmm.
initially our first ancestors were like, they use it as a tool. Um,
Yeah,
but now it's used for recreational use and whatnot, which is great. But yeah, no, we were taught like you do not point this at anybody. Like your finger is only on the trigger when you're ready to fire, and you always keep the
yeah,
barrel either pointed straight at the ground or up in the air, that kind of stuff. But
yeah. Exactly. All that safety stuff.
yeah, my grandfather played into like being really safe. Like he would have us shoot a tin can with a BB gun, and we had to hit it 10 times in a row before he let us actually go out with like a real gun to like shoot squirrels or rabbits or anything like that. Because he wanted to
Yeah.
make sure that we could like hit it and not let us suffer or anything like that.
That's so cool too that you had somebody who was willing to like teach you the proper stuff. Like I went and did classes at a shooting range and stuff like that, but and then I learned a lot from you guys as well, but just on how to handle things and how to take care of things and stuff like that. So even when I got my first shotgun, I was like, okay, like here's what I need to do and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, going back to the school stuff. So you were homeschooled all the way through. I know that one of the things we were talking about was the for a good chunk of it, it was just kind of like you at home with your siblings all day, every day.
Yeah,
And it wasn't until later that you guys joined uh, the homeschool communities that we had, like Achieve and Group Solutions. So Achieve was kind of like it was the Association of Christian Home Educators of Ventura County, which kind of
yeah,
provided things like um, what am I looking for? Field trips, school dances, graduation, that kind of stuff. And then Group Solutions was kind of it was like a classes kind of a thing. So parents taught classes at this thing, and it was almost like going to real school for a
yeah. It was
day
like a
every
public
2 weeks.
school. Yeah,
Right, right. So around what time did you guys join that kind of stuff?
I think we started doing that. Was probably 7th or 8th grade, or
Okay. So
maybe just into high school. It probably was the
yeah.
beginning of high school is when we joined Group Solutions.
Okay. What was like the big shift, or what was like, I don't know, what was kind of, I mean, and maybe you don't know because I mean it was your parents making this decision, but was there like a big moment that was like, okay, we're gonna go from like we're at home all the time doing school to like now we're gonna go be around people and do that? What was that change?
Obviously, we were part of Achieve, and then my I don't know how, but my mother got turned on to the idea of doing her attending Group Solutions. Um, uh, so I think we just had like a discussion about it, and she just kind of laid it out like, hey, like, do you guys want to do we want to do this? Do we want to go and do this? Um, and I remember being all about it because it just got me out of the house, and I was able to like hang out with more of my buddies. Because I know like your sister, and like I remember a bunch of the other families that were able to, put their kids in the same classes and whatnot. So I remember it just being like, I was super excited.
Yeah.
Shit, it's like I get to go to public school. Like, so that was something that I really, uh, really liked about being part of Achieve, was being able to be around other kids and socialize. Because
Hmm.
before then it was just, yeah, we were just at home. It was just our siblings, which, I mean, I love my siblings. I'm still close with all my siblings. Um, and so, it was fun. And then, you'd have the aspects of like, recess was in your own room. You could do whatever you want. Um, and then, my mom was really good at teaching us and, helping us out with our schoolwork and homework and all that stuff. When she was, in good enough shape to do so. Obviously, from her, some of her medical conditions kind of would put a damper on some days, and so we'd be kind of like doing it ourselves and whatnot, which we made by, and it was fine. And but then, yeah, being able to join Achieve and Group Solutions was huge for me.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you guys kind of coming into the group and starting to get to know you guys more, and it felt very much like because a lot of us had known each other from like, I mean, some of these people had known each other from like kindergarten. I knew a lot of these people. I started being homeschooled at second grade, so and I didn't even join groups I think until third or fourth grade, and so so some of these people I had known for a little bit, and then yeah, and then you guys coming in at like seventh, eighth grade kind of level. I remember kind of being like, who is this family? Like, where did they come from? And then you
Mm-hmm.
guys knew, like, you guys had obviously been in the Ojai Valley. And I was like, where did these people come from? It was like, it was just so mysterious to me. And yeah, and I remember some of the moms were like, because I had my buddies. My buddies were Derry and Ben, and we were like the Three Musketeers, and one of the moms was like started being like, "Oh, you should invite Nick to come do this stuff," and we're like, "No, but we're like the best buds. Like we are the guys."
The Three
You know,
Musketeers.
exactly. We yeah, and I was like, but I'm so thankful that they pushed us to like really have you and Ben kind of come in because first of all, you guys are just awesome, but I'm so thankful that we were not stubborn about like no, like I have my friends and I don't want any more kind of a thing, because I would have missed out on a great friendship that way. I was gonna ask because yeah, I remember your mom kind of being sick sometimes and things like that, and so were your older siblings kind of like taking over like teaching you at that point, or like how what did that look like? Because I know it wasn't until later that my parents kind of would just start handing me textbooks and say, hey, like here's your textbook, like read through it, and
Mm-hmm.
take these tests or whatever. Were you guys doing that already at a younger age, or did you have like your older siblings kind of put helping teach you guys?
So we kind of had like that kind of stuff at a younger age, basically like writing assignments and writing books and stuff like that. So we would kind of be able to just like, my mom would set the stuff in front of us and we'd be able to just kind of like go through it. And she would be there obviously to help us teach or to help teach us, um, and go through those situations. But then, yeah, on days when she, wasn't, was sick or uh, either was working or something like that, then mainly it would be like my oldest sister. She would sometimes help out with that kind of stuff. And then I remember, she just remembered this. Um, we had some really close family friends of my parents that also was doing like homeschooling with their children. And so we would go over to their house, I want to say like every Friday, every Thursday, or maybe it was every other Friday. And she would basically help teach us, different subjects. Usually that was on days when my mom was working, the same day that my dad would be working. So that way we weren't just home alone because we were too young to be home alone. So like either we'd
Right.
go up to my grandparents' house, which was a thing we did every week for years, or we would go over to this, really close family friends, and she would help teach us and whatnot. But then, yeah, I don't really remember Justin doing any of that.
It was all on Brittany. Brittany was like mom number two, kind of.
Yeah, yeah, she was like mom number two for sure.
I was gonna ask you too. Like, was your dad always super involved with you guys as like homeschool kids? Like, And what I mean by that is like my dad was, he was always the principal, but he was like, for the first couple years of us being homeschooled, he wasn't like super involved. Like my mom chose all the curriculum, she did all the teaching, and he was really just there for like discipline. You know, we
Hmm.
got out of line, he was there for that. And it wasn't until, I don't know, maybe sixth grade. It might have been a little sooner than that, but where he really bought into the whole homeschool thing, and then he was like, "Oh no, I want to have like some say in like what educate, you know, what curriculum we're using, and like also like if you need help with math, if you need, you know, whatever." He started
Yeah.
to kind of also become a teacher. Granted, he would go to work all day, but you know, when he got home, he was there to tutor us. Was your dad kind of like involved like that, or did he have a period where he was like, "No, that's your mom's thing," and then like when I, you know, I'm the principal, kind of a thing.
To my knowledge and like looking back, it was mainly just my mom who like picked all that stuff because my dad would be working all day. And the days that he was off, we would either like do yard work with him. I think that was probably what like his contribution to like the homeschool thing was, like bringing us alongside and having us help with yard work or doing little repairs around the house, home project. Uh,
Right.
I think that's kind of what he would help out with, and yeah, he would definitely help out with discipline. But my mom also was like on top of being like the principal as well. So they kind of like shared
Yeah.
that role. Obviously, if we were like super out of line, then like in the moment, my mom would like take care of it immediately. But like
Yeah.
lighter duty stuff, she'd be like, "Hey, just wait till when your dad comes home, like no, you're gonna get disciplined or whatnot. You're gonna get a spanking or
Yeah.
something like that." And I just remember being
Yeah.
like, "Oh, that's no, no, please."
You know what's so funny? Your mom is like one of the sweetest people I know, and she always like she sends me the sweetest messages and stuff all the time. But um, I have seen her a few times kind of get to that. I don't want to say it's a breaking point, but I've seen her get the stern face, like the,
Hmm.
you know, you need to listen to what I'm saying,
Yeah.
and I'm always like, oh my gosh, Christy's getting serious. Okay, let's let's listen
You're like,
up.
well,
And like I'm 27 now, like I'm my own adult, but if your mom got that face, I'd be like, yes, ma'am.
yep. Yes, she has that fiery spirit.
We also had friends who, you know, before we joined groups, like we'd go to somebody's house or whatever and kind of, you know, do school on a day where my mom needed to run errands or my mom needed to do something else, you know. But that's, you know, it's good. See, and that's what's cool about the homeschool community is that once you start to get plugged in with it, they're there for you for whatever you need, right?
Yeah.
But so so group solutions, I know that was also a big part for you in like the socialization aspect. So like one of the biggest things that people say all the time about homeschoolers is that we're antisocial weirdos. We do not know how to interact with people. I've met a couple of those kids. I have been that kid where it's like,
Hmm.
you know, I can't look you in the eye. I don't give a good handshake. You know, when I talk to you, I mumble under my breath, kind of a thing. But you know, what would you say that like starting to go to groups was like a big catalyst for you to kind of become more of a people person and like gain some of those social skills? Or what do you think was a part of the homeschool experience that kind of got you to that place of like, you know, being quote unquote not a homeschool kid, right? Not a, a homeschool weirdo in the social sense.
I think for me, it was good because I was able to kind of like, you know, act like myself. I wish my parents were, super encouraging, like just, be yourself. Don't like you don't need to conform to like the people around you to do stuff or to act a certain way or whatever. So I was like raised to just totally be okay with being myself. Um, and so going to group solutions and just being myself was a really cool way to just see like how other people would react to, my behaviors or, my humors or whatever and stuff like that. Um, which also allowed me to just kind of see like, okay, maybe I shouldn't act this way or like,
Right.
okay, it was a good learning curve for
Yeah.
me to like get feedback from people that weren't my immediate family.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I think the thing with when you're at home with your family all the time, and it's just like, in my case, it was like three to four of us. You know, you at least had a few more people than that, but like
yeah,
picking up on social cues is different than from like, you don't pick up on social cues from your family quite as much as you do from other people, right? Like Like I think about the fact that it's like when I'm pushing my sister's buttons, I'm pushing her buttons, and I'm ignoring all of the things that if I was talking to you and I noticed that you started to get agitated, that's a social cue for me to kind of like, okay, it's time to reel it back a little bit, you
Uh,
know. And so I think things like group solutions were super helpful for both of us to kind of be like you said, it's like be yourself and see how people react to it. But then you start to
yeah.
learn those social cues of like, okay, hey, this person wants out of a conversation. Or they're uncomfortable, or it's very obvious they need to go do something else. Okay, like learning how to dial that in.
I think for me it was good to learn like because yeah, I would be just with my family members, and then I would like go to group solutions to be able to see like you, Derry, and Ben, and all them, and I just be like want to just spend all my time with you. And then yeah, learning those cues of like okay, yeah, like it's time for like you to go do your own thing and me to go do my own thing, which I think took a little while for me to kind of figure out. There were certainly times where like it was hard for me to pick up on social cues, partially because of my disabilities. Like I've since a really young age I've struggled with like dyslexia and stuff like that. Um, I haven't like been properly diagnosed by a doctor, but from growing up and certain things and like not picking up certain social cues, like it's kind of apparent that like okay, I struggle with slight dyslexia or whatnot. Um, and so like I can remember just like certain saying certain things and like not understanding what I'm saying and then seeing how people react and they're like, whoa, like what? And I'm like, what do you mean? What? And then, I can remember like just like an older friend groups just kind of picking on me a little bit because I was a little different. And so like, I was super close with certain people that were here in the valley. And then I don't know, it just felt like as I was getting older, there were times where I'd get kind of picked on, but then just kind of moved away from like hanging out with some of those people, and then like going with group solutions, everybody was like so much nicer and sweeter.
Yeah,
Um, and the moms and dads that were there were really good about correcting us like in a loving way and not like scolding or whatnot. But
yeah,
yeah, I think for me it was learning those social cues, um, and just kind of like knowing when to allow myself to be like super goofy and silly and hilarious, and then like when to hone it in and be serious and you know get my work done
yeah.
and do stuff like that.
Hey, that's skills I still learn to this day. You know,
Yeah, yeah, you
I'm
never
like,
stop learning them.
exactly, exactly. No, but yeah, I'm with you because like I totally, and everybody's different, right? It's like you just got to learn to like to roll with the punches, right, and roll with the waves, and kind of experience everybody. And I think that's one of the things that public school, in talking with my friends who went to public school, a lot of them talk about, yeah, like the getting picked on, or the, getting made fun of because of a certain thing you say or whatever. And that certainly happened inside of the homeschool group. I don't want to say less than, it kind of felt like less than, but you almost kind of need that to help get you to certain places in your life, because because then you have to be able to understand like, okay, well, why are they picking on me, and
Hmm.
why do they feel the need to, right? And some people are just bullies, but like,
Yeah,
you know is it, you know is it really something, is it nothing, all those kinds of things, and you start to you start to get
start
all
to
the
like
like,
start to spiral.
exactly, and I mean, it, it's one of those things where, again, it's a learning process. And like I remember when I got to school, my my biggest goal when I first got to college was the fact that I was like, I don't want anybody to know I was a homeschool kid. So when people would ask, I would say, oh, I went to a private school, because that wasn't a lie. I did go to a private school. It was a
True.
private school of two,
Yeah.
and it happened in my living room, kind of a thing. But for the longest time, I didn't want anybody to know about it, and so I kind of tried to reinvent myself, and it I think I overdid it a little bit too much, and I lacked some of those social cues that were needed to kind of be like, okay, I need to exit, or I just need to shut up in this moment, or any of the normal stuff, right? And I had a professor sit me down, and it was just like, hey, like you got to learn to just like be cool, like be cool in the situation, and like don't do this kind of thing. And I was so appreciative of that because she came from a place of like, it wasn't she wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to help
Yeah.
me, right? And she was just kind of being like, you're doing you're a little extra right now, and you just need to kind of like, let's just cool it down just a little bit. And so once I started to feel more comfortable and started to tell people like, oh, I was a homeschool kid and like all this stuff, I think one of the worst things you can hear from somebody, I don't know, I hate this, is when someone goes, ah, that makes sense. When you tell them you're a homeschool kid and they go, ah, that makes sense. It's like
Yeah.
something's wrong with you. And I'm like, no, I would rather when people hear that, they go, oh, that's super cool. Like, tell me more about that, you
I-
know?
Like, why does that make sense? What do you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, I knew I was being weird or I knew I was acting strange, but dang. Yeah. Anyway, so I wanted to touch on also like post homeschool, we took very different paths. I went to a 4 year university, did a bachelor's degree, and then I know you have gone into like the trades, which like totally makes sense for you because the for the entire time I've known you, you've always like worked on engines and just been like obsessed with taking things apart and putting them back together,
Exactly.
kind of thing. I remember you calling me one day and being like, "Hey, dude, I need to like switch the gas tank out in my Bronco. Like, can you come help me?" And showing up and like, yeah, we like totally switched out a gas tank, and I was like,
Dude, I
I would have
totally forgot about
never.
that. Dude, that was awesome. Yeah. 'Cause it was you, me, and my dad.
I think so, yeah. So
Yeah.
just to give a little bit more context too, so like Nick's grandpa has a ranch up in Ojai where we grew up, and he's got big property, but he's also got like a big barn with, I mean, every tool under the sun practically, and
Hmm.
he's got a car lift in there. And so, yeah, I mean, you guys would always tell me about like, oh yeah, we fixed this on the car, we did that, and yeah, you texted me one day and you were just like, hey, I need to do this. Like, you want to come help out? And I was like, sure. And yeah, we took the gas tank out and totally replaced it.
Yes.
That was the most mechanic I've ever felt in my entire life.
Well, I'm glad I was able to provide that for you, man.
So tell me a little bit about like, because you're a mechanic now, you're a diesel engine mechanic,
I am.
and but like, what is that? What did that process look like? Kind of like, is it a certificate? Is it a degree? Like, what does that look like? And then like, how long did that take? And what kind of jobs can you do with that?
Yeah, so obviously the route I ended up choosing was, I grew up doing so much work with my grandpa and his farm equipment. Um, and book learning and like, you know, school was never easy for me because of just like the learning disabilities that I had. But I found that I was very much a like visual learner and hands-on learner. And so by like helping my grandfather work on his farm equipment, I got really into it and it became like something that I loved doing. And it came really easy to me. And I was able to just like, the way my brain works, it's very much like my grandpa's. I'm able to like look at something and I can basically deduct like, oh yeah, that's how that works. Or like I'll take something apart and be like, oh, okay, that totally makes sense. Um, and like a lot of times he could explain something once to me. And because he was able to explain it in a way that like really like sat well with me, I was like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. And I never, he never had to re-explain it to me ever again. And I remember I was probably 12. We took a tractor and like split it in half to put a new clutch in it and put it back together. And till this day, I know the guy who ended up buying it from my grandpa, and it still runs like a champ. And so then from that point on, after high school, it took me a good couple years to really figure out what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. Um, at the time I was working, so my parents were super supportive with me taking my time, as long as I was working. They're the way they saw it is like you're either working at a job or you're going to school. Um, so since I had a job, they were very much like, hey man, like we're not going to force you to do anything that you don't want to do, especially if it ends up not working out. We're not going to force you to pick a college and study something that you're probably never going to use or whatnot. And they knew that I was very mechanically inclined. Um, and so they had talked about like, have you ever thought about like taking a trade, like being a woodworker or electrical, plumbing, whatever. And obviously they thought, hey, like you could become a mechanic. Like there's universities that specialize in being able to just become a mechanic. And so I thought about that and, looked into it here and there. And then I eventually saw or found out that Ventura College opened up or reopened their diesel technician program. So I was looking into that, and it was, the classes were cheap. And ended up being a 2-year program. And so I had signed up for classes, and uh, it ended up being like really, really fun. I remember being like super anxious my first day getting down there. And just like not knowing what to expect, not knowing like, oh, what's my instructor going to be like? What are my classmates going to be like? Uh, but first day I was there probably 45 minutes before the class started. And then I continued doing that through the entire time that I was taking classes. It was usually me and 2 other guys that would get there like wicked early, and we would just hang out in the parking lot and chat. But then my instructor, like, he was super funny, and he made learning real easy. He was a technician himself. He worked for Caterpillar for years, worked on buses for years. And so he just made learning fun, and it was he was able to like cater it to my mind in a way. Like, it was really easy for me to pick up on, how things work. And going into these classes, I already knew quite a lot. And he was really impressed. He would like talk to me on several occasions. He's like, dude, like how come you haven't, you didn't start this sooner, man? Like, you could be like in the industry, like at this, like if you'd started, blah, 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 blah. He's like, dude, you got so much potential. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, well, thanks, man. I just, this is, I grew up doing this stuff. And he's like, dude, you're like way ahead of the game. And so, I ended up doing really well in all the classes that I picked. The one class I was the most concerned about was electrical wiring and different electrical components, because like that was just really foreign to me, and I always struggled with electrical issues on my own cars. And so I was like, oh man, this class is gonna just suck. I'm gonna probably do really terrible. But I ended up thriving in that class, and like was able to understand it, and was able to apply it to like working on my own stuff. And I ended up getting, A's in all those classes and whatnot. Um, and so, yeah, you can, when you take the course, you can take just the classes related to that course and get a certificate, like a certificate of completion that you took the course. But then if you want, you could do general ed along with that, and you would get like a degree. But I didn't necessarily want to do, general ed. I felt like I didn't have to. And so I ended up, opting to just take the classes. And thankfully, the job I worked at, my boss was super, super supportive of me taking these classes. So like she was able to work with my schedule, and, it wasn't like, oh, you're going to be here only 2 days a week. Well, sorry, I got to let you go. It's like, oh, you're going to only be here 2 days a week. Totally fine. Like, no, hey, I'm going to give you a raise so that way you're, still making hopefully enough money to, get by.
Yeah.
And I ended up making some really good friends in that class, and I did really well in that class. A lot of the guys, like I just, I was kind of like the class clown. I was always coming up with just like one-liners and dad puns, and like everybody was just like, dude, what the heck? Like, where are these dad jokes coming from? You're not even a dad. Like, what the heck? And so like I was just like, it was really hilarious. I just was able to get the whole class to laugh at times and whatnot. And a couple of guys that I got really close with, I was like, oh yeah, I'm homeschooled. They're like, oh, what? No way, you were homeschooled? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, oh, what was that like? And so, and at that time, I didn't really have much of an issue telling people I was homeschooled, and like, getting their, oh, what, that makes sense. Or, oh, no wonder you're so weird. And I'm like, oh, that's just how that's that's how I am. That's where I came from.
That's just who you are. Yeah.
It's who I am. And so I was able to just embrace it. And no matter what any people said, I didn't get any negative reviews or anything like that. And I was never teased, because we were all adults. But yeah, it was a really, really cool program. Unfortunately, the last couple classes I had to take, was right when COVID started. And so it got really difficult because we had to then go to Zoom meetings for the class. And because of COVID, the lab portion had to be like really strict, because we would have class in person at Ventura College, and then later in the day we would have the lab, which was at like a trucking center. So they had like all these trucks for us to work on. They had these big engines on these engine stands that we would learn how to do stuff with. And usually we just have the whole class there. We were able to work on with teams and whatnot and get things done. But then with COVID happening, it was like, okay, like your lab time was cut in half, and like the class was cut in half. So like the first section of the class would have to come, and then after they're done, the second section of the class would come. So it ended up, it was tough. It was really tough, and I barely made it through those classes, but I was able to graduate and get that certificate. And then because
Nice.
that certificate and taking those classes, it accounted for, not accounted, it basically the 2 years of classes equaled 1 year of experience at like a shop or something like that. So when I went find the different places, I was able to say, hey, I took these classes, this is what I learned, this is how I learned it. And then they were able to kind of figure things out. And then I went and applied at the place that I obviously started working at, and they ended up hiring me, and now I'm still with those people, and I'm still working with a lot of the same coworkers, which has been really cool.
It's so cool too because I mean, I didn't think about doing a trade until I was already in college. And I was like hating my life doing general education. So I don't blame you for skipping those classes because they felt like a waste of time,
Yeah.
to be quite honest. But what but I never really pursued it because I mean I was already there, and then by the time I did 1 year, I was like, okay, I'll go back and do a second, and then by the time I was done with my second year, I had figured out that I could do school in 3 years. So I was like, well, I'm already halfway done. I would be dumb not to just like suck it up and go do the third year, and then if I
Mm-hmm.
do decide to do a trade, I mean, then bonus. I also have this higher education, right? And
Yeah.
I have a business degree. So then down the line, I could own my own business and kind of have done, kind of prepped for that also, kind of a thing. And but then once I got out, I was like, I don't really want to do a trade. I mean, I still think about it, but it is something that looking back on, I'm like, man, I really wish that I would have at least just looked into it more because I think there's some really cool programs. Also, like you said, it's like 2 years. You walk away with a year of experience to put on your resume.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the trades are slept on hard, right? Everyone's going to
Yeah.
college, and the trades are suffering because nobody knows how to do them anymore.
It took me probably 2 or 3 years before I like made the jump to go and actually start applying places. Um, Mostly because like the place where I was working, right when I graduated, I told my boss, hey, I want to give you some time to like find somebody to replace me. And then that ended up turning into like 3 years, mostly because I was like, I was comfortable where I was at. And I was
Yeah,
afraid, at the time I was like afraid of change. And it was like, oh, it was really daunting. So that
yeah,
kind of played into not wanting to start applying places. And so like, again, my parents were really patient. Um, but they were always, they were good to remind me like, hey, like when are you going to start applying? And I was like, oh, they were really patient and very kind and loving. But then I remember one day my instructor reached out to me. He's like, hey, this company, Giffen Equipment, they're looking to hire an e-techs man. They called me asking for guys that I think would be good for the job. And you were the first person that came to mind. So I think you'd be a great candidate. And I think you should really go down and apply.
see, that's the way things work at this point now. Is like it's all about who you know.
Exactly.
That's been my business too. Is like once I started to get tied into the podcasting industry and meeting these people, it's all about, oh, I know these people. And lucky I kind of lucked into I work. My first show that I ever got was like the guys that ran that show, they're well known in the podcast space, and so they are connected and they're master networkers. So they
Mm-hmm.
know everybody. And so even when we split up originally and now I'm back with one of them, kind of redoing the same show that we used to do. But it was so cool because now when they let me go, they were like, oh, like we can't pay you anymore because of just where the business is, but like who do you want to be connected with? Like we got you, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, I sent them a list. I said, hey, can you help me get connected with all these people? And lo and behold, boom, it just like started happening. I got a job pretty quickly after that, making kind of it was about the same money, maybe a little bit less, but like it is really a networking thing. And so to have a professor who vouches for you
Mm-hmm.
to get into a job, it just feels nice, right? When someone's kind of like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
got the guy for you,"
Exactly.
Um, it just feels nice. And and you're also that kind of guy too, where it's like I know that down the line when you guys are looking to hire, or somebody, you hear about some job, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, I know this guy who, he's a great mechanic, or he's a great, whatever. You should check him out, and you know and the thing is, Nick, you are like such a trustworthy person. I know that you wouldn't purposefully give someone a bad suggestion, and I think most people know that. Most people who know that about you, and so your word is your bond, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And that's super cool, though. Well, and it's cool because before we started recording, we were talking about you worked up from like the base level of like basically just dealing with rental equipment when it came back and like very minor stuff to now you're kind of running the show. Well, not running the show, but like you are. Is your job title like mechanic or
My job title is shop mechanic, whereas
okay?
before it was just rental inspector. That was the job title
Right.
he gave me. Um, but yeah, now that I'm actually shop mechanic, like different responsibilities.
You get to play on engines and stuff all day,
Yes,
probably, right?
I get to work on a large amount. And like what's cool is working for like a equipment rental company rather than just like if I were to go work for Caterpillar or John Deere, like working for Caterpillar, I'm just going to be working on Caterpillar specific equipment. And so obviously like they send you away to get trained to work on their stuff. Um, or they have specific kinds of materials that you use. But what's cool with working with an equipment rental company is the like vast variety of different kinds of equipment, different brands. Like it's like nothing's ever the same. Like I'll work on
Yeah.
anything from scissor lifts that are having some sort of electrical issue to huge excavators that need you know new hydraulic cylinder seals, or this excavator needs new tracks, or hey, this engine needs new injectors, or just like, hey, something's
Yeah.
going on with this thing, go figure it out, see what see if you can fix it, or see if you can diagnose it and then order the parts and then fix it. And
Right.
so it's been super super fun. And like the guy that I work with, that they hired, is a company hired from like another part of the country. He has worked in the industry for like 10 years. And so he has, he knows a lot of people. He's worked with tons of different kinds of people. And so when we started working together, he saw a lot of potential in me and was constantly just encouraging me and like telling me like, dude, like, don't you worry, like it's going to happen. You're going to get that job title sooner rather than later. So he was always
Yeah.
really encouraging. And he was like, dude, you have what it takes to be a mechanic. Whereas
Yeah.
the other guy that I had worked with, he didn't have what it took. And obviously he was let go, and then I was able to fill his position, and not make mistakes.
Based on for someone who's coming out of high school, right? And they're thinking about maybe doing a trade, they're considering college, that kind of thing. What would you say like was, where what should they be looking for? I mean, what kind of programs should they be looking for, to get into a trade, and like, what type of person, I guess, does it take to really want to do that, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, uh, it's, as simple as like, are you good with being on time? Are you trustworthy? Are you teachable? For somebody who's just come out of high school and is like thinking, big colleges are not for me, I would much rather just pick one thing and use that, like, going into a trade. I would say, like, if you're coming out of high school and you're like, oh, I really want to get into, framework or carpentry, I would just start going around to different places, like, any kind of companies that specialize in carpentry or plumbing. Go in and just talk to those people and like say, hey, you guys have like, you know, uh, not a mentorship, what's the word? Like an
An
internship.
apprenticeship kind of a
Yeah, an
thing.
apprenticeship. Yeah. Apprenticeship programs are huge. And a lot of times, an apprenticeship program, they take you on as an apprentice, but they will also still pay you. Like I know
Right.
one kid who's in high school, at the church that I go to, he is taking one of those apprenticeships, and yet they're paying him, but they're teaching him at the same time. And so Like if that's the route that you want to go, apprenticeships are huge, and I would strongly look into those and suggest that. But also look around to see what is offered in terms of the specific kind of trade you want to look into. Like check out your local community colleges and see what they have. Like, go to their job fairs and like find those kinds of booths that offer trades, and just talk to those people and just
Right.
um, walk into businesses and just say, hey, what do you guys do? Like, how would I
Yeah.
go about getting hired here? What would you look for in somebody? And then also just like being on time, like showing up,
Yeah.
early. In fact, a lot of places will hire you and keep you, like if you're on time, if you are well dressed and, even somewhat well manicured and well mannered, and just like for me, I'm really humble at work. Like I don't hold myself high like and mighty. I'm like, okay, yeah, like I know a lot, but I know there's still a lot that I don't know, and I
Yeah.
am totally willing and ready to learn from any mistakes that I make, and owning up to those mistakes if I make one, and just moving forward and hoping I don't make a big enough mistake where they can me.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like being willing to learn, not being afraid to not being afraid to fail, because failing is another way of learning. Um, and just like taking the initiative and really being finding something you're passionate about and then just pursuing that passion. That was how it was for me. Like I'm very passionate about working on stuff. I love seeing something that's broken and being able to fix it. I love fixing things. I love the feeling and the pride that I take in like,
Yeah.
you know, this machine wasn't running. I was able to get it running. Like it's like this feeling of accomplishment.
I was talking with my mom the other week, and my mom is part of a Master Gardeners program, and they have a community garden in Ojai,
Yeah.
and they had some kind of piece of equipment that was like busted and not running properly. And
Yeah.
she
A
called
wood
you,
chipper.
and yeah, and she called you and was like, "Hey, like, could you recommend somebody to fix this?" Or and you were just like, "Oh, let me like come take a look at it," and she was like, I felt so bad because like we couldn't pay him, and like we gave him like tomatoes, or they gave you something,
Yeah.
but you just came and you fixed it, and you are now like the hero of that group of people because you fixed this thing that none of them knew how to do. And it's amazing because that's what I've realized is that it goes back to that networking thing, and like you said, being willing to go into companies and ask questions. You never know who you're going to meet, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
I have met people that have resulted in huge deals for me, and I've met people that I know at some point it's going to come back in my favor, because I did something good for them. And that's just the thing. If you can show up and be consistent and be trustworthy and loyal and on time and give value, right? And sometimes you do have to expect a little in return, right? Everybody's
Yeah.
got to get paid at some point.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
if you do nice things for people, it will always come back. It's kind of that karma mentality, right? You put good out in the world, good comes back to you. And but yeah, I really liked what you had to say about just like go take the initiative to ask questions of people, because a lot of times people are totally down to talk about what they do, especially if they're passionate about it,
Oh yeah.
right? They can go for hours on, for me, it's podcasting. You get me started on podcasting stuff. Oh my god, I could geek out for hours, and just go down the rabbit hole of microphones and interfaces and show titles and all kinds of stuff. Like I can just go down that rabbit hole with people.
Exactly.
The other thing that I wanted to kind of jump back to that I think you didn't gloss over it. It was important, but you said how your parents have supported you all along the way and given you like the time and the space you needed to kind of like decide what it is that like you wanted to do, and just giving you like a safe environment to kind of like pursue that, right? There was
Yeah.
obviously like you have to be working a job or you have to be in school or things like that, but it's so cool to have parents like that. My parents were kind of the same way. They were like, okay, when you turn 18, you got two options: you go to school, you get a job. That's it. And as long as you can show that you're doing one of those, like, you can hang around, and if you need to stay at the house for a while, you can do that too, and
Yeah.
things like that. But it was it was motivating to have someone on my side who was kind of being like, well, what do you want to do? And after college, I moved home for a year, and they were there. They were like, I mean, my dad gave me a year. I moved in, and he was like, okay, you've got 1 year to kind of figure this out. And after a year, we're either going to start charging you rent or we're going to kick you out. Like,
Hmm.
so kind of they lit enough of a fire under my butt to get me moving, but they were
Yeah.
always there for if, if things weren't going my way or I needed to pivot, like they were just there to support
Yeah.
me. And your parents, I will say, have been some of the most supportive people in my life. As far as like, it was an unpopular opinion in my opinion, it was unpopular of me to want to move across the country to go to college. A lot of people told me, don't do it. It's a waste of my time. It's a waste of money. Your family was not one of those people who told me that. They just always were like, we're super proud of you, and whatever you go do, we know you're gonna like be a rock star at it. And I always appreciated that, and because that's what you need to hear in life. I mean, granted, you sometimes got to get kicked in the butt a couple times, but
Yeah.
you need to have some people on your side that are encouraging you to go after the things that you really want. And when you make those decisions, to really like push you to say, yeah, that's the thing. It's obvious.
No, for sure. They were always really supportive of me taking my time. And I think that stemmed from a place like when I was really, really young, I was very opinionated on what I did and didn't do. And like if I didn't want to do something, I just wouldn't do it. Or, like I can remember, like for example, my my mom when I was a kid, little kid, she had signed me up for Pee Wee soccer. And I wasn't really much of a sports person, and to this day, I'm not really into sports at all, except for maybe like rock climbing,
Yeah, not the
shooting guns
traditional
and stuff like
sports of
that.
like
Not the
baseball,
traditional
soccer.
sports.
Yeah,
Yeah. So she had signed me up for Pee Wee soccer, and we were only like halfway through the first practice, and I decided this wasn't for me. So I just went over and sat down next to my mom on the sidelines. Was like, I'm done. And she's like, all right, well, uh, this wasn't for you. And then later on, she had signed me up for basketball because she worked at the recreation department. And so she was able to
right.
get really good deals for, us kids to like, if we want to do basketball or soccer or baseball or softball, she was able to like make that happen for us for like little to no money. And so she had signed me up for basketball at one point. And like every one of my other siblings played basketball or like flag football or something like that. And so she's like, oh, honey, I signed you up for basketball. I was like, oh, no, no, I'm good. I'm good. She's like, no, but honey, I already signed you up, so you have to. And I was like, well, unsign me up. But I was just like very much like, no, I don't want to, that's not for me. I'm not
Yep,
gonna do that. And so
it's
I think like
not
my
gonna happen.
parents, are like, okay, yeah. Um, we're not gonna force him to do anything because if it's something he doesn't want to do, he's not gonna do it. And
Yeah,
that's how it
yeah.
was.
They had to wait till you came to them and said, "Hey, mom, I want to play basketball."
Yeah.
It
Or
was
like,
not the
hey,
other way around.
I wanna get into rock climbing or I want to get into
Right.
whatever. They were super like, when I made a decision to do something, they were all about it and all for it. Um,
Yeah.
which is just kind of funny, like remembering those situations or like having my mom tell me those stories. Like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense.
That's
Like
hilarious. I
as to
love
who I
like
am.
mid practice just walking off the field and being like, "I'm
Yep.
done." That's
Yep. I was like,
that's
yeah, this isn't for
hilarious.
me. And it wasn't like I was pissed or anything like that. I was just like,
Yeah.
no, like uh, and like the coach was really adamant about stuff like that. And so I was just like, I don't like this guy. I'm done. I remember
Yeah.
it was like that. I took tennis lessons too, but that was something that I wanted to do. I was like, hey, I want to try
Hmm.
tennis. And so my parents were like, okay, yeah, this is great. Yeah. So like me, Ben, Carly, and I remember doing it was like the Mitchells and like the Lamos and stuff like that. But I remember like I just was so uncoordinated with sport. Like I did not do well in that sport. I either was hitting the ball out of the court or I was like hitting it like not near hard enough or whatever. And I remember the
Right.
instructor just was constantly getting like frustrated with me because I just wasn't either like listening or
Yeah.
I didn't know how to do what he was teaching. It was really, really funny at the
Right. You
time.
couldn't track. You couldn't track with it. That's
Yeah.
so. That's so funny.
But like, so when it came to like sports, I never really was into sports because I wasn't really much of a competitive person. I didn't really like being competitive because I would sometimes get way too competitive and I didn't like how I got when I got competitive. But then like, if my buddies were like, hey, we're gonna go do disc golf or we're just gonna go to the tennis courts and whack the ball around. I was like, oh, dude, I'm so down. Let's do it. And so it's like, if I'm not playing, like if I know I'm not playing to like win, I'm just playing to have fun, then I can totally enjoy it and have fun with it. Um, so I've been able to do that with buddies like, disc golfing or ultimate frisbee or going and just hitting the tennis ball around with some friends, that kind of stuff I could get behind it and I enjoyed doing. But when it came to like playing competitively,
It's so funny because there's such a difference in you and I. I'm the firstborn kid. You're number 4 out of 5,
hmm
um, and it's just funny because like I, the way my brain works is like my mom also signed me up for tennis, and I enjoyed playing, but it wasn't. I'm kind of with you. I felt so behind from other kids, and there's certain things I just couldn't pick up, and so I got frustrated and ended up quitting. But I had to like see that season through, right? Whatever was
yeah,
paid for, I was like had to see it through, and so, and that's just partly like the way my brain works. It's just that firstborn people pleaser kind of a person, and that's my own issue that I got to work on. But it's just so funny to hear you be like, "Oh yeah, I just like walked off. I was just done," and it's like
yeah.
I could never, right? I could never picture doing that. So that's so hilarious. I was gonna ask you, and kind of coming to an end here, but like, so with all of your experience at this point, both now homeschooled, not being almost a decade out of homeschool, you know, if you were to have kids, or if someone came up to you tomorrow and they're a young family and they're like, "Hey, we're thinking about homeschooling," would you recommend homeschooling, or would you homeschool your own kids, or do you think you'd put them in a public school system or private school? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Coming from the homeschool, part of my life, I would certainly recommend it. Especially with, how public schools are, nowadays and just like some of the things and some of the values that they're taking away, that I would want my kids to know. Um, just some of, you know, schools these days, their policies and whatnot, I just don't really agree with. And so I would opt more towards homeschooling, my own kids
Mm-hmm.
too. But there's also a part of me that would almost want to put my kids in public school just so that way there's hopefully more kids like me or like more kids like you that are out in the public school system fighting for, uh, you know, the things that I had when I was in public school. Um, for me, being a Christian, just like having kids, my kids, growing up with the same kinds of the same views as me, having their own spin on their views. I don't want my kids to be
Right.
perfect cookie cutter cutouts of myself. They are totally entitled to be able to believe what they want, but hopefully, like I'm able to raise them in a way where they have their own relationships with Christ and they're able to like share that with the kids around them if they were to go to public school, to be able to be
Yeah.
that light in a place that's like going very dark. Um, so like that would be the reason for me to put them in public school. But then there's a part of me that's like, I would want my kids to be protected. And so that's why I would
Yeah.
mainly want to have them homeschooled. But then there's a part of me that's like, but I don't want them to turn out like the
Yeah.
sheltered kids
So
that are like, oh, hi, my name's Jeremiah. That kind of
yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
I would
Yeah.
want them to
Yeah.
be in the world, but not of the
Right.
world.
Yeah. So I mean that goes back to like the whole our whole conversation about group solutions. So and I always tell people this too. I mean, you got to figure out what works for your kid first of
Yeah.
all. But one, having parents that are super involved in your education, I think is always important. You know, learning never stops. That was something that my mom always told me was like learning never stops. You will continue to learn the rest of your life as long as you're
Yep.
willing to. And so she learned stuff along the way. My dad learned stuff along the way. And so I just always tell parents, I'm like, be willing to have that learning spirit, whether you put your kid in public education, private education, whether you choose to homeschool them. And then I always tell people, if you choose to homeschool your kid, finding that group of people who is going to be your community is like absolutely key.
Yeah.
And we talked a lot about, the socialization aspect of that, but also just like, having it takes a village to raise a kid, right? And so, but also like our lives were so much happier when we had friends, when we had community around us.
Yeah.
you know, I look back at high school and I'm like, those were some of the best years of my life, right? Because those were my closest friends. I had people around me all the time, that I loved and adored. And I mean, I love where I'm at now, but It's just some of my fondest memories come from that time period of like I had lots of friends, but and then I also had a great education,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I definitely I value your input on wanting. It is a debacle, like you said. It's like you don't really know till you have kids, but because you got
Yeah.
to figure it out with them. But no, I value that input you had of like, I don't know. There's a part of me that says yes, and there's a part of me that says no, and you know, you just got to figure it out, I guess.
Yeah. Just got to see what comes of it when you start having kids, you know.
But I guess in closing, is there anything else, any cringy stories, anything that you're just like, oh my gosh, in reminiscing, this came to my mind, or any last words you want to leave the people?
When you talked about like cringy stories, I can just it just takes me back to like the dances, the achieved dances that we used to go to. Dude, the
Yeah,
uh I can just remember some of those dances were they were super fun, but like me, I was not a dancer. I did not like the idea. I mean, like it stemmed from like, I didn't really know how to dance. And so it's like, oh, I don't want to have to ask somebody to dance and then just like, do some boring dance or whatever thing. But I can just
yeah,
remember like nights when they would do like Sadie Hawkins and like me, my little brother, or like my little brother Ben, and like Nathan Gibbons, we would just beeline it to the bathroom because we didn't want to get
yeah,
asked to dance by anybody. So we're like, no, we don't want to dance. So we just book it to the bathroom and just wait it out for a
yeah.
couple minutes and then come back out. The dance would be over and we're like, oh, okay, cool. Thank God.
So school dances for us were very different from public school because it was like swing dance and ballroom were the main things. And
Exactly.
so it was not like there was not like DJ and we were bumping and grinding and just like shaking it on the dance floor. Like it was
Yeah.
like there were steps and there was
There were
appropriate ways, there was
rules,
dress code, there
a
was
dress
rules.
code. Oh my
Exactly.
gosh.
And yeah, and then Sadie Hawkins dance, for anyone who's not familiar, is it's reversed. So instead of guys asking the girls to dance, it's the girls ask the guys to dance.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do remember that. I mean, I was very much a dancer. Like at 12, my mom put me in dance classes
Yeah.
and I just kind of fell in love with it. So, but I definitely understand. And the first couple times I went to a dance, I was like, I would hide in the bathroom and I would, just sit in the corner. I was like, I don't want to be any part of this.
Yeah.
But, uh, but yeah, that's so funny that you guys would just be like, later.
We're like later, it's our time to go. But yeah, the dress codes. I remember showing up one night for one dance and it was like button up shirts. So we were wearing button up shirts, but we were wearing jeans. And I remember that did not qualify for the dress code. And they like turned us away. And I remember being like, that is bull crap. What the heck? But this was up when it was at the Poinsettia Pavilion. And so I remember we just ran down the street to David Worth's house and we were able to borrow some of his slack for the night. And we were able to come back and actually go into the dance and actually, have a good time and enjoy it. But yeah, I remember like totally being like, that's so dumb. Like, what the heck? Like, we should be able to just come and hang out and have a good time.
I was talking with some of the girls from growing up, and like, because for the girls, it was a lot worse than the guys because they also, in addition to having dress code, they had like their skirts had to be certain length. They usually like
Mm-hmm.
wear shorts underneath. Certain amount of cleavage had to be covered. Straps had to be a certain size. Like it was like
Exactly.
intense. And girls got turned away a lot more than guys did because for us it was easy. You just wear, like you said, button up shirt, and most of the times jeans was acceptable. Those few
Or
occasions that it
slacks.
wasn't, it was slacks, which most people had in their closet. It was easy. I mean, we really didn't. It wasn't that tough.
Yeah.
I also showed up to a couple dances in jeans or something, trying to, like black jeans, trying to like pass them off as slacks and being like, some parent being
Mm-hmm.
like, those aren't slacks. Being like, well, I'm already in here, so
Yeah. You're like, what are you going to kick me out? Huh?
yeah, exactly. I'm already dancing. I already paid. Like, I don't know what you
Yep.
want to do. Also, my parents were on the board of Achieve, so I mean, nepo baby over here. Uh, but yeah, it's crazy. It's funny to think about some of those cringy things like that, like just weird rules around. Also like we had growing up in like that Christian environment too. I remember youth group. It was just like you know, guys are blue and girls are red, and
There
together they
was
make purple, and we
no
don't make
purple.
purple.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. No purple. And it was kind of like that at the dances too, where it was like you guys were allowed to dance together, but I had multiple times where dads came up to me and they were like, "Oh, your hand was too low," or like, "I didn't like the way you danced with my daughter," or whatever.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I don't I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I mean, I didn't ever feel like I was a pervy person, and I
Yeah.
definitely wasn't like I wasn't trying to grab booty or anything, but it was
Yeah.
just one of those things where every now and then I was like, but I'm just doing like I took so many dance classes. I was like, I'm just doing what I was told to do or taught to
Exactly.
do,
And it's
and they're
just
just
the
and I'm
parents just
like,
didn't like it, and it's just like, well,
yeah,
they come in, they talk to you, and you're like, oh, okay, man, like, well, whatever, I guess.
yeah,
Okay, sure, but
yeah. But that's the kind of side of homeschooling that I think hopefully it's eased up a little bit. I mean, obviously, I understand wanting to protect your kids and make sure they have a great, safe environment to be in, but
I get that too.
uh, it's also like one of those things where yeah, some of those rules were just dumb for no reason, and a little dated. So hopefully things have
Yeah,
turned around a little bit. We're
yeah.
2024 at this point.
It'd be interesting to see if they're even offering to do like call them school reunions with a tree.
I know a couple groups have gotten together over the years. I was going to try to get together my graduating class. One of the things I've talked about with Carrie Franz was putting together just kind of a big reunion in general and just for everybody and just saying, hey, if you kind of a range, like if you graduated from this time to this time, we're going to meet, you know, this year at so and so bar or, so and so's house or whatever.
Yeah,
And just hang out and catch up and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, it's kind of hard. I'm in Tennessee. You guys are all in California. A lot of you guys are in California. I know there's
California.
other people who live across the states and stuff, but it is tough to get everybody kind of like back together. So maybe this podcast will make it happen. Who
Yes,
knows?
maybe it's like the like get the band back together, and it'll just like arrive.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Nick, I appreciate you coming on so much and catching up and all the cringe stories and like I loved talking to you about like your career and that whole transition. So thank you for being open and sharing with us. And yeah, I mean, any last words? I mean, I kind of already asked you that, but
No, yeah, I just, dude, like, thank you for reaching out and asking me. This has been super fun. Just being able to like get to hang out and just like chat with you has just been super rad. Because yeah, it's been several years, and I know we get to kind of, we'll message each other every now and then on Instagram or something like that. But it's just been really cool to be able to just talk with you, and also be part of a podcast. This is cool. I've never been on a podcast before, so it's like ooh, new territory. Um,
newbie over
how
here.
where am I putting my weirdness dial, in my mind, like, ooh, but it's
Yeah.
been really fun. I've really enjoyed it, and it's just been cool to go over, you know, the homeschooling perspective
Yeah.
with somebody else who's been homeschooled, and just talk
Yeah.
about it. It's been really rad.
Well, dude, I appreciate you so much. And for those of you who are still listening, tune in next week. I'm gonna have another great guest. I don't know who it is gonna be yet, but they'll be there for sure. And thank you so much. Like, if it's your first time, like, follow, subscribe, leave a review, all the things you got to do. And until next time, we'll see ya.
Yes, we will.